Okay, hey everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. A little bit rainy and cloudy today for me, but otherwise, it's a nice day for some music making. Hope everyone's doing all right. So we've got a great stream today. For any of you that might have caught the last stream, where we did the bulk of the work for our Let's Mix and Master a Song series using Channel 13's song Surround You. I'm going to go ahead and do a save as. I'm going to do a mix B. Always a good idea to save separate sessions for each mix because you never know when the client's going to say, hey, you know what you did on the kick drum on mix A? Can we do that? And then, well, if you saved over it, then you're in a bit of a pickle. So anyway, today we're going to be doing some mix tweaks, and I'm actually really excited about this because I worked with the band on a new song the other day, and it went really well, and it kind of got us thinking about this song, since these songs are eventually going to end up on the same EP and possibly record. Got us thinking about some of the ideas for this song and some things that we might have thought, maybe we should go a little bit more in that direction or this direction, So we are going to change things up a little bit on this mix, and I'm excited to show you kind of what that process looks like of taking a little bit of a scene change and adjusting some things to have a little bit of a different feel. So essentially the short version is we're going to go a little bit less indie rock and a little bit more pop on this mix, a little bit less in the St. Lucia territory and a little bit more in the Weekend territory, which, it's interesting because one of the trickiest parts about mixing is that there is really no wrong way to do it. Same thing with production in general. There's not really a wrong way to make a mix or to record a vocal or to, you know what I mean? It's tricky because you have to figure out exactly what is the most compelling and will get the song across, and that's hard. Sometimes the band doesn't exactly know, sometimes I don't exactly know, but sometimes, like with this time, you learn through the process of working on a record. You'll find something and you'll say, I think that's it, I think that's closer to what we're doing, so that's good. So the mix, mix A, I was happy with, the band was happy with, but then the more we kind of were listening to it and we worked on this new song, we were like, maybe we should take it a little bit more that way. So still, a lot of the bulk of the work has been done already, but we're going to sort of readjust the way the mix is perceived. So let's just take a listen to a little bit of what we've got so far.
I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tides back to you, yeah, got me feeling alright. I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you. You said that we could fly away somewhere high
Okay, so you get the general idea. Again, the mix sounds to me good, but is it right? That's the bigger question, and that's the more important question when working with clients. I mean, or even on your own music, it's tricky to know exactly what's right. And but after talking with the band, after listening to it, after debating it out, I think we have a pretty good game plan. So, what my primary goal today is to give the mix a little bit of a different framing. So, I'm going to have the mix be a little bit more pop-centric, which is going to mean more sort of density in the sub-lows, like below 100 hertz, and even, below 150, but then a little bit less density in our mid-range instruments, so like guitars, make those a little bit leaner, and synths will make a little bit sort of bigger and wider and fuller. Guitars we can make darker. Bass guitar and synth bass will make bigger. So let's just get into it. I'm going to start by just sort of the initial thing. To me, the biggest thing that stands out is our kick drum needs to be much more of a hard-hitting pop kick drum.
To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Oh, now your currents in my veins and I'm paralyzed.
We don't want it to get too clicky, so we're going to make sure it's a little bit darker, so it's louder, but it's slightly darker. That's kind of a common theme you will see, is how can we make stuff louder, but not then not rip your ears off. And one of the ways is we can make things slightly darker.
To keep the oh, now your currents in my veins.
I'm going to go to a section later in the song and try to get my bass and drums kind of working again. I'm okay with my synth bass being a little bit wider and a little bit fuller. Again, it's about, it's like some people will think, if I want to change my mix to be more, if I'm in a more of an indie rock context and I want it to be a little poppier, they think the answer is EQ. But I challenge all of you to think about, like, in the context of a full mix, EQ is not just about adding lows or removing low mids or, whatever moves you're making. It's also about the EQ of the mix, meaning if you turn up the kick and the bass, your mix has more low end, so it's a different approach to it. We're not really necessarily going to be doing a lot of EQ. It's more about, quote, EQing the mix via the balance of the instruments that we have, if that makes sense. I say that as I do an EQ move. So what I'm trying to do, again, is increase the sort of fatness and fullness of my low end. Give my low mids a little bit less density on guitars and synths. And again, I like to start with the vocal and things. So the next thing we're going to pull up here is the vocal. I know that the first thing that came to mind was the kick and bass needed to be a little more on the pop side of things, a little more punchy and subby rather than it's sort of tighter and more, indie rock kick. Also going to give our hi-hat just a little bit more sizzle. Might even give it a little bit of reverb. It seems a little bit dry to me. The vocal a little bit more sort of modern pop bite. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you, just a little. Surround you just the way you are. Hey, with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. I'm also going to give the vocal a slightly different space here. I brought up this new vocal plate. And I'm going to add a little bit of that. It's a little brighter, a little bit longer. Hey, with you when you are by my side. Without it. The effect we have is cool, but it's a little more subtle, a little darker. This is going to be a little bit more obvious. Hey, with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. Okay, now our main synth pad here. Hey, with you when you are by. This is going to get a little bit fuller and a little bit wider. Hey, with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. I don't necessarily need this pad to be super wide, but I was narrowing it. a little bit. I'm not going to do that now. So another important part of this song is the percussion. So I want to make sure the percussion's got a little bit more sort of hi-fi bite as well. Hey, with you. I'm going to use a little bit of a stereo delay to spread these claps. This is kind of like the Haas effect, where we're spreading left and right sort of in a phony way, but hey, it's usable.
Addicted to the way that you
Give a little bit of extra sizzle on our rides. I'm going to do this with Pultec. Another important thing to note, I was talking about this with a friend of mine the other day. Some people have commented, how much top end I've added, but I want to clarify something about like the Pultec. So when the bandwidth is all the way broad on a Pultec, okay, these numbers don't coincide perfectly. Okay, so like this 5 is not necessarily a dB marking. And that's true with a lot of analog EQs. The numbers you see are not necessarily dB. You'll notice this is not labeled in dB. Unlike an API EQ, those are labeled in dB, but this Pultec is not. So if you look at this on an analyzer, if the bandwidth is all the way broad and you boost, quote, 5, it's actually only like 3 dB, something like that. But as you go narrower, this might be 5, 6, 7 dB. I don't know off the top of my head. But the sharper this is, the peak gets higher. So just be aware of that. Like if you're watching tutorials or, worried about doing too much EQ or whatever, there's a lot of analog style EQs that the numbers that you see are not actually accurate. So you gotta just trust your ears.
surround you.
This is kind of our like big synth pad in the courses. These are a little bit narrow to me. So I'm going to process them as a group because they're all kind of narrow. Now there's a lot of ways to make stuff wider. You can use the Haas effect. You can use various stereo tools. You can use mid-side. You can use, to some degree, most of them use mid-side or delays to some degree. So I'm going to try Dr. MS. It's a really interesting plugin. This pad is pretty subtle.
To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Oh, now your currents in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you. When you are slowly fade away.
I'm also going to make our guitars a little bit darker. Maybe mess with the verse guitar here in a little bit, but... I'm going to use Filter Freak on these to give them a little bit of grit and a little bit of darkness.
You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you.
So as you can see, I'm kind of undoing some of the things I had done. And that's okay. So here I'm trying to give this piano a little more density in the low lows, but not so much in the low mids. Trying to clear space in the low mids. Again, this is totally genre dependent and stuff, you know, like if this were a rock mix or whatever, it could be a little bit more, you could have a little more mid-range overall, but we're trying to focus a little bit more fatness in the low lows, remove a little bit of density in that low mid area, but then spread what low density we do need, try to spread it a little wider.
I close my eyes. Oh, now your current's in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Oh, now your current's in my veins and I'm paralyzed. When you are by my side. They said that we could fly away somewhere high waves, addicted to the.
So as we've added a bunch more low end on things or turned up the low end elements, I got to make sure and check my master bus because no doubt it will be pushing into it a little bit harder. Let me check the big section of the song here.
Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you.
I'm gonna pull our room mics down just a little bit. Again, we're trying to go a little bit less indie rock, a little bit more pop. I could actually stand to make my snare a tiny bit bitier. to give the snare a tiny bit more reverb as well. I know our claps have reverb, but again, it's a vibe thing. I don't want the reverb to be coming from room mics. Add a little bit of reverb to this as well.
To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Oh, now you're covered and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away.
So one thing that can help sometimes is using a frequency analyzer like this. And I actually like this one because it is not that accurate. No offense, Waves. But this is like a very broad, like super zoomed out view of the general sort of EQ curve of your mix. Now, again, you can't go nuts with it because every song is different, right? Like if you try to compare song to song and make them look identical, it's a fool's errand. You're not really gonna be able to do it unless you're playing the same song in the same key and you have the same singer, and you know what I mean. But it can give you a general idea of your relationship of lows to highs and mids, right? And you know, I have seeing these enough. I know like a rock song looks a certain way in terms of the general shape, and a pop song generally looks a little bit different. So I don't know. That might come in handy in here in a little bit. But I'm going to check this out.
Start it took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
I'm going to give our doubles a little bit more verb as well.
From the start, it was all around you.
I'm going to pull down the delay and put verb on instead.
And got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. From the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. From the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. From the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. From the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
I'm okay with these not being quite as wide because they usually happen when the vocal's not there.
Surround you just the way you are. Surround you just the way you are.
I guess they come in here.
Surround you.
Hey, what's up? We got Channel 13 in the chat. Special thanks again to Channel 13 for letting me use this song, helping people learn and stuff like that. You know, it really is a sacrifice when a band lets me use it, especially, you know, this song hasn't even released yet officially. So, you know, people want their music to be like a thing people want to listen to. And as anybody out there knows from mixing, you know, by the time you get done mixing a song, sometimes it's like, I don't ever want to hear this again in my life. You know what I mean? So, you know, other people out there learning, you might not necessarily feel the desire to go listen to this song, but whenever it does come out, whenever that will be, definitely go check it out. It'll be a little while because we're working on an EP and stuff, but you know, anyway, thank you, Channel 13.
Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are.
going to add just a touch of doubler on the lead vocal, just to give it a little bit of something.
Surround you just the way you surround you. Surround you just the way you are.
It's a very pop thing to do.
Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Man, I close my eyes. Oh, now your current's in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitation slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. Man, I close my eyes.
It's a little bit of a narrow, low mid thing I want to try to take care of.
Oh, now your current's in my vein. Slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up.
Got to be real careful with adding high mids like this. Like you can't just dump them, because then the mix sounds weird and scooped and like you have your fingers in your ears. But if you add too many, then it's harsh. So just be very careful in this region, like 2 to 6K.
Man, I close my eyes. In my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you.
Alright, so I'm going to, again, kind of check my framing and get my vocals and my drums and my percussion and my bass working. I like this digital crash, but it's a little bit too filtered, I think. Back to the rescue again. I need to do a little bit of work on my snare. Okay, so my backing vocals, again, kind of checking your framing, you know, checking your basic, like, drums, bass, vocal, gives you a better clarity on what you need to do. And hearing that just told me, okay, my backing vocals are a little too dull. They're taking up a little too much low mid room. So I need to make them just a little bit sort of leaner and meaner in that area.
Surrounded us the way you are. Surrounded.
These sound pretty good, and we worked on these already. Ah, those are little bit murky down there.
Surround you is the way you are. 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 Surround you.
I had the right idea with this, but
Surround you is the way you are.
again, it's a combination of like EQ and just turning down the elements that are problematic.
Surround you is the way you are. Surround you.
Like when you have a group of backing vocals that have like low mid, middle, and high harmonies, like you can EQ them, yes, but you can also rebalance them, which shifts the overall impression or EQ of the group, if that makes sense. I might also EQ my group.
Surround you. There you are. Surround you is the way 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 you are. Surround you is the way. Surround you.
I'm going to pull just a little bit less compression on this multiband. I just don't know if I need it. Okay, let's work on our guitars a little bit. Actually, I'm going to go grab a quick drink of water. I'll be right back. Okay, so we're gonna get back to this. Let's check out our guitars. They got a little more vibe now. They're a little bit more, you know, dirty and darker. Still might, again, shift the energy on those guitars. See what I've got going EQ wise. I might just pull this down, give this a little bit, something like that. Mellow this out. So that, I might make that a little bit darker as well. And maybe a little more lo-fi even, not just darker. This is a great plugin if you guys out there don't have it. It's a really, really neat plugin. Really cool plugin for making stuff a little more lo-fi. Okay, so these, I'm going to make these a little bit, the lead, I'm going to make that a little bit thicker and more interesting as well. Alright, that snare verb. So I think I am going to make that verse guitar a little more lo-fi, just for vibes, you know? Also makes those chorus guitars pop a little bit better. I'm going to add a little bit more verb on the funky guitar.
Start, it was all around you.
Again, a big sort of recurring theme of what you're seeing me doing on this is shifting the energy a little bit, where I'm bringing back a little bit of lows on things. I'm being a little more aggressive in my low mid cuts, and then depending on what the sound is, I might be making it brighter or darker. I'm trying to tilt the response, as it were. Like I said, like if you look at this sort of curve, every song is a little bit different. Some of them have a pretty linear drop like that, you know, where it goes sort of from lows to highs. Some of them, you know, a pop song generally has kind of like a more W-shaped curve where you have a big low end, a little bit leaner in the low mids, big vocal right here in the mid-range and lead instruments, and then a little bit up top, a little bit flatter. So we're kind of in that territory right now. You know, it will adjust. And again, I'm not trying to check this thing constantly. It's just kind of an interesting thing to look at to see, okay, is the relationship starting to look, you know, what you expect? You know, or are you, for example, you can easily get into go on a path when you're mixing and realize like, oh man, I'm making this mix like way too fat or way too dark or way too thin or way too, you know, so this is helpful for that. And I wouldn't say at this moment we're exactly where we need to be, but we're definitely closer than where we were. So yeah. Okay, I think I made vibrato on the verse guitar a little bit too goofy. Oh, that's another thing I was gonna do is I was gonna pop my synth bass into the first chorus as well. I forgot to do that. It's a different progression there. Found it. Oh, I see. It's the second half. That makes sense. Do-do-do-do. This pad's really not even meant to be heard. It's like if it was gone, you'd notice it. So I like to call like tuned reverb, you know what I mean? It's just there, just sitting in the background. I find that multiband compressors can be really helpful on groups because, you know, as a group of instruments changes, right? Like all these synths, the content of the low mids or the high mids or whatever will also change, right? Like as it gets denser, it's almost like you need to EQ them. Like I'm sure you all are familiar with the idea of like the more things that are in a mix, generally the more aggressive you might have to be with EQ to clear space, right? Well, if you put EQ, multiband EQ on a group, it's almost like it will self EQ itself, if that makes sense. Because as more instruments come in and this level goes up and the density goes up, it will push down these EQ frequencies. It's a very handy thing to do on groups. Like, for example, when we're at the big dense part here, I feel like it's getting a little bit too much mid-range, like right around 400, 500, somewhere in this territory. But at the beginning of the song, barely touching it at all, right? It's a really handy way to keep things in check over the course of a song that doesn't require tons of automating. Again, I also have to make sure and keep a little bit of room in there for my vocals and for my keys. Which, you know, keys in general are very mid-range heavy. I'm going to pull out that resonance because that's going to drive me nuts. All right, I think that's getting closer. I think we're getting closer to, you know, a fatter, kind of more hyped up, poppier sound rather than like an indie rock kind of sound. Let's just go ahead and take a listen to it from the top. I'm going to keep vocals off for now, so just to kind of listen to our music and see if there's anything jumping out at us. Okay, we're gonna pause there really quickly. I want to put some reverb on these plucks. I also want to make that house delay slightly shorter feedback. I guess there is a little reverb on them, but I want to put a little bit of my own. So even though the delay is really wide, the pluck itself is not. So I'm going to try to spread that just a little bit. Again, there's a couple ways you can do this. I'm going to try a little bit of Haas effect. You can't get away with a ton of Haas effect on percussion because you'll hear the, you'll hear the flam. I'm not sure if I like it or not. Let me try just blending that in. So let me try doing like this. Okay, so I feel like I need one of those claps to be darker. I think that one. I think that's the one that's kind of bothering me. It's a little bit slappy. It'd be nice to get a little bit of thickness out of it too. Make the clap feel a little bit bigger.
Oh, now your current's in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Back back to you, yeah, got me feeling alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. High away, addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. Slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. Yeah, got me feeling alright. Yeah, got me feeling alright. Said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Fly away, high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Said that we could fly away,
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Sunray.
away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view.
So another note I got from the band was, let me just double check these really quick. That these, we've tackled most of the stuff we need to tackle, but let's see, these surround you backing vocals at 242-ish, right about here, yeah. A little bit more distant, or at least noticeably verby. Okay.
Surround you just the way you are. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you just.
I think I'm going to make these verbs bigger.
Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you.
You're very welcome, Joy. Thanks for joining.
Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you.
These really high backing vocals are really meant to be pretty distant anyway.
Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you just the way you are.
I'm kind of wondering if I want to make these stereo doubles darker or brighter. I think they're already pretty bright and it's not working super well for me, so maybe darker.
Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tides back to you, yeah. Days were empty, days were empty, days were empty, days were empty. Days were empty, but when I turned the tides back to you, yeah, got me feeling alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you. You said that we could fly away
feel like that swell needs to be a little more dramatic. Maybe I'd give that a little bit more low end or something.
To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Oh, now your current's in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Did to the way it was all around you, yeah, it was all around you. It was all around you, yeah, it was all around you. It was all around you, yeah, it was all around you. It was all around you, yeah, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you.
Okay, like checking out our FFT, we can see we've got a little bit more of that sort of W shape here. We got a big fat low end. We've got our vocals poking through here, and claps, snaps, percussion, things like that. Again, this is just a general guideline. If you try to follow a frequency analyzer too closely, you will be severely disappointed because every single song is different. I mean, if a song is in a different key, these points will be in a different spot. You know what I mean? If the vocalist sings high, this will be, a little bit higher. If the vocalist sings lower, this is going to be a little low. You know what I mean? So it just, you can't go too far. My big goal here is I want my kick to be nice and big, my low end to be nice and big. I want my low mids to be a little bit leaner, and I want my vocal to be nice and strong, and I want my high end to not trail off too early, right? Like, it's very easy for indie stuff to get pretty dark, and that can start trailing off starting at 10K or so, which is around here. and it can start to do that. And so I've still got some nice sort of sizzle going on up here. I'm gonna run to the restroom really quick, and we'll be back. We're just gonna put on some finishing touches and probably be on the stream for another maybe 20-30 minutes. I will be right back. Okay, so Sunray asks, is it important to avoid antiphase? Now, in a lot of situations, I would say yes. But if you listen to pop music like The Weeknd or Arizona or anything from Taylor Swift or anything from the Chainsmokers or anything from, anything like that, a lot of modern pop stuff is super wide, like super wide. Um, so no, I would say don't worry about it. Worry about what sounds good because I get the theory behind it. I understand that you don't want stuff to be too out of phase and wacky wide and stuff, but at the same time, like it's all art, and there are certain genres that are less likely to have uber wide stuff, and there are certain genres that are just wide all the time everywhere. You know what I mean? So really, I think it's just more important that whatever you're working on, you recognize kind of what the width situation is and what the client is looking for, or what you're looking for if it's your own music. If you're looking for that sort of uber wide sound, definitely compare the width on your stuff versus now. I can't play you a reference mix because of YouTube guidelines. I've got a reference here in the session, but obviously this is a commercially mixed song from somebody, and I don't want to get a copyright strike. But you definitely make use of checking out references and comparing. That's why I have it in the session. This is a song that me and the band talked about as a good reference. So when the stream is over, for example, I'm probably going to just triple check it with that and just see how how is my width, how's my sort of fatness, how's my brightness, is it kind of in the same territory. The one important thing I will say, you can see that I've turned down this reference mix about 6.5 dB. That's because this is mastered, and I'm not mastered. You know what I mean? Like this is I'm just mixing it, so it's very, very important that you compare your reference mixes at the same rough RMS level. Not peak level, because, they're probably both going to be around, 0 or pretty close. But RMS level. And you can do that by putting on a meter, like a loudness meter of some kind. I use DMG Dualism a lot to check out loudness and things like that. And you can compare the loudness of what's coming through your master bus versus the loudness of your reference track, and then try to level match them within, as close as you can. Within a half dB, a tenth of a dB would be better, but obviously different songs, it's tricky to get them identical. But try to get them pretty close in RMS level. That way, when you're comparing, you really have a good reference for because if you compare a mix to a mastered song, it's just going to be unfair. The mastered song is going to sound huge, and you know what I mean. But if you really compare them at the same RMS level, you'll be able to make better decisions about, is this loud enough in terms of my low end? Is the brightness there? Is the width there? And it's a personal decision too. If you don't like your stuff to be really wide in the low mids or in the high mids or in the highs or wherever, you don't have to do that. If it sounds weird to you, then don't do it. There are some pop mixes that the band has referenced that they're kind of, some of them I really like and some of them I don't, and so the goal is to find things that the band thinks, this is what works, and that I think, yes, this makes sense for your music, because again, every individual project is different. And so, yeah, you just try to find that thing that makes sense, that inspires the right decisions. Obviously you're not just trying to copy stuff, but you're trying to get it to inspire the right decisions to move the song into the direction that the client wants. Anybody else have any questions while we're just taking a short break? If so, just let me know in the comments really quick. It was a great Sunray. That was a great question, by the way. I'm sorry if I missed anybody in the comments. Alex, thank you. Keith, hello. Let's see, anybody else I missed? I think I got everybody, but yeah, if anybody has a question, just feel free to put it out in the comments, and I'll try to get to it. There's a little bit of a delay between like real time and what you guys see, so it might take me a minute to get to it. Okay, so the band gave me some notes to try out some vocal delays. So I'm going to try that. Let me check out my notes really quick. So I'm going to try these delays. A couple of lines on verse 1 and verse 2, just to fill up some space and keep the interest of the listener.
I'm overthinking and asking why.
Why?
I used to build.
Right? 2 delays there. So I'm going to make a vocal specific delay for this. And we're going to automate it on and off. So I'm going to make a delay using probably Echo Boy. In doubt, I pretty much use Echo Boy for everything. No shame. It's an amazing delay plugin. If you don't have, I mean, really all the Soundtoys stuff is just, it's been a standard for years, and for good reason. It just works and sounds great. And you have so many different styles of delay that you can do, tons of things to tweak. I mean, it's really, really awesome. Okay, so I'm thinking I need...
I'm overthinking and asking why.
This would be a half note.
I'm overthinking and asking why.
So it's only going to come in on Y. So let me go ahead and automate that on to see.
And asking why.
I'll refine that by hand. Make sure this is turning on exactly where I need it.
Asking why. I used to build a wall.
Oh, that's about right.
I used to.
Okay, so I'm going to modify this delay a little bit.
Asking why.
Might do ping pong to get a little bit of left, but I want a half note on both. I don't want it crazy wide. Part of that is a dynamic decision where, like, I don't want things to be. Hey, thank you, Hunter. I appreciate that. I don't want things to be too wide yet. You know what I mean? Because if you spoil the width too soon, then the chorus doesn't feel wide.
Asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize.
Okay, it's a little too clean. Let's try some other delay types. How about distorted?
Asking why. I used to build a world.
All right, that's pretty cool.
Asking why. I used to build a world inside. Asking why. I used to build a world inside.
Another cool thing you can do is send from your send. So on my delay throw bus here, I'm going to actually send this to a reverb.
Asking why. I used to build a world
Very cool thing.
inside my head to visualize.
Alex, great question. What's the most effective way to lower the crest factor? This might not be the answer you want to hear, but unfortunately, this is kind of what I have found to be the case. It's a series of a lot of decisions that happen in the mix and in the master. It can't all be handled by the master. Part of it is containing transients, using saturation, limiting, compression, all kinds of various things, as well as tone. Like if something is too bright, the transient is really going to smack through. So sometimes you have to get the tone that you want, you have to make something brighter, but then use a little saturation to tame it back, transient wise, and saturate that peak a little bit. If that make, because if any of you out there are checking out my videos on saturation, you'll see that like saturation is really just like a harmonic process, and when you do that, you actually kind of spread out the sound a little bit, and you can make it less peaky but not sound any quieter, even though it technically is quieter. So, for example, something like on these snaps and claps, take snap B for example. So check out the levels here. That's pretty hot, and if I put a little bit of saturation on there, there's a million good saturation plugins, but how about the soft tube? Okay, so check this out. Watch the meter. So we're getting a lower crest factor, but it doesn't actually sound that much quieter. Now, yes, we're getting some like extra thickness and things like that. We can choose our saturation plugin based on kind of how it responds, right? I might need to pull some low end out of it now. Or choose a different type. Okay, so here's a good example. So our sound is pretty similar to how it was before. But notice our peaks. Around -9. Versus with this off, it sounds very similar. -4.8. Okay, so saturation does not have to equal distortion or super audible. You know what I mean? Essentially, what you're doing is you're making it more harmonically complex. And it's like spreading out the response. And that's saturating it with harmonics. And you get a controlled sort of thing. But to the ear, to our, imperfect human ears, it sounds really close. If anything, it sounds a little smoother and slightly louder, even though peak-wise, it is quieter. That's the general process of saturation, the general idea. So anyone out there is not familiar with the term crest factor, what that means essentially is the difference between the peak level and the average level. And if you want your mixes to end up loud, it's this weird game of like controlling peaks, but also not making things sound just distorted unless you want it to sound distorted on purpose, but also giving the mastering engineer enough room, to work on the stuff, but also, it's a very complicated process. It's not as simple as just put on a limiter and make it louder. You know what I mean? Because if you do that, then and if the mixer has not controlled peaks in enough of a way in the mix, they can be super unruly in the master, and the mastering engineer is having to do 8 dB of work essentially to get your song 8 dB louder when they might only have to do 3 or 4. Right? And just like with many things in audio, whether it's compression or saturation or whatever it is, often it sounds best done in stages. So a little bit while recording, maybe you use a tube mic, or maybe you're using an analog, nice preamp that has a little bit of saturation on it. And then maybe you do a little bit in the mix. Maybe you do a little bit on the master bus, right? So the idea is to give yourself small stages of it and gradually control it. Keith, I've used a couple of EQs on this project, but mostly my favorite EQ and most people's, workhorse EQ these days is FabFilter Pro Q3. Amazing EQ. If you don't have it, you should definitely get it. It's an awesome EQ. It has a ton of features. But Alex, I hope that answers your question. It's kind of a series of decisions that kind of leads itself to one overall result. And I wish it was as easy as just like mixing things how you want to and then letting the mastering engineer make it loud, and it worked, but it doesn't quite work that way. Now, what's funny is, and I talk about this on the podcast a little bit, but like in the analog world, like we're talking 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, early 80s at least, people about this, right? Like they were using analog tape, they were using analog preamps, they were using like the gear they were using basically did it for them automatically, whether they wanted to do it or not. And in fact, like if you talk to anybody who was around in the 50s and 60s and 70s doing records professionally, a lot of them struggled to get transient response because they were recording on tape. So to get things with a good noise floor, you have to push your levels decently into tape, right? Like, because if you record too quietly, you'll bring up tape hiss. So you would push your levels, to tape. But then when you push your levels to tape, you get more saturation from the tape. And so it was like this, this give and take, this compromise that you had to make of noise versus saturation. And what people found is like, also when you, sorry about that, hold on. Everybody still hear me, or my think maybe my OBS is giving me a little bit of problems here. Stand by. Okay. Sorry about that. Um, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So some engineers from back in the day would struggle to get punch and attack and good transient response because they were getting saturation on the way in. So they had to use compression to bring back the punch. But then, oh no, we're mixing to tape also. So it would get crushed. So it was like a series of saturation, and then you add compression to bring back the punch, and then more saturation to tame it back again. And then you'd send it to the mastering engineer, and they'd run it through gear, and then the final would go to tape. And, you know, it's just like a series. It's what I like to call the transient life cycle. Because it kind of keeps going back and forth between the tracking gear that you use and then the mix gear you use and all this. Now, unfortunately, in the digital domain, you know, people will blame digital for not sounding as good or whatever, but really, it's just that we have to work a little bit harder to manually do those things, because our gear, it's not that digital sounds worse, it's that it has no sound, really. It kind of sounds like nothing. And the analog gear has a very definitive sound, and it definitely does modify transients and saturate and add harmonic content, and way, you know, more than digital, which does basically nothing. So that's kind of what's fascinating and frustrating about mixing in the box is that you have to consciously make these decisions, whereas people for decades did not. Even people, you know, mixing in the 90s and early 2000s, mixing on a console was still different than mixing complete recording to the box, you know, and mixing in the box completely. Because even on a console, you still have, you know, each channel has its own saturation. You have your master bus, you have your line amps and all that stuff that add their own little bit of saturation. And some people, like Chris Lord Alge, for example, hit the console really hard. And that gives a type of saturation that's part of his sound, is that he pushes his console really hard. And, you know, that's just a thing. Hunter, favorite mix bus compressor in the box and out of the box? Yeah, Alex, it is crazy, and it's frustrating, and it's, you know, it does require us to do more work. It's one of the reasons that I have invested a lot of money into analog gear, into analog compression and analog, you know, nice preamps and stuff, because I do try to get some of that stuff on the way in, and I try to get my live tracks to sound as good as possible. You know, and not go too far, but give them a little bit of compression, maybe a little bit of saturation, to save me a ton of time in the box later. Like, I don't have to necessarily saturate everything. Now, these claps and snaps, these are samples, so like I didn't record these, right? And you can even just see it on the raw sample. You can see this crazy high transient, right? And so, you know, I'll probably end up leaving this harmonics plugin on there. Okay, favorite master bus compressor. I, for years, used the glue from Cytomic. I typically like the SSL style, but I generally don't like it 100% wet. So you can see I've got about 80% wet here. I like the UAD SSL a lot, and I like the auto mode a lot, but sometimes I will adjust my release to, you know, 0.1, 0.3, or 0.6 seconds. I also like them when they have a little bit of a sidechain filter. I want my kick drum to pulse, but not so much that it's out of control and it bumps the whole mix. If you do want your mix to pump a little bit, you don't have to use this. But I don't do much on my master bus. A dB or two, maybe 3 dB in the biggest section of the song, but I tried to be pretty gentle with it. The Cytomic glue is great. The UAD is great. The Waves does not have parallel, and it doesn't have the side chain. I also, so I don't use that one a lot, but I like 33609 sometimes. I like out of the box. I really like the Allen Smart C2. I like a Waves 2500, or sorry, I like the API 2500. In the box, I'm not crazy about the 2500 from Waves. And from UAD, I like the UAD one a little better, but not on the master bus. I don't know what it is, but something about it on master bus doesn't quite sound right to me. But the hardware one sounds great on master bus. It's just a little more mellow. I feel like the plugin's a little intense. But you know, it just kind of depends. Again, my master bus, me personally, I don't do a ton of compression on it. I used to do more. These days, I really only try to do a dB or two, just kind of tap it. Hopefully that's helpful. Alex, yeah, this will be live, or sorry, this will be processed and up on the stream, up on the channel when this is all done. So don't worry about that. It'll be there. Okay, let's check out our delays again.
Asking why I used to build a world inside.
So I'm gonna reduce the number of taps on that.
Asking why I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. To visualize. Those days were
Not sure about that one. We'll try it in context, but that one's a little weird.
to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tides back to you, you got me feeling alright.
Let's try tides and all right.
When I turn the tides, when I turn the tides back to you, you got me feeling alright. You know I've been alright. And alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you.
Let's check out verse 2. There's a couple of ones we can try in there too.
To keep the moment, I close my eyes. I close my eyes. I close my eyes. I close my eyes. Oh, now your current's in my veins and I'm paralyzed. And I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you. 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 When you are by my side, my side, my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you.
So I like the idea of this going throughout, but the delay needs to modify a little bit. So it needs to turn down a little bit there, and it also needs to be a little wider.
Surround you just the way you are. surround you. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you.
Okay, so apparently I cannot automate the width control on Echo Boy. You learn something new every day. So I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to leave it all the way wide and put on a imaging plugin that is like narrower, and then I can turn it off.
Asking why I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but feeling alright. You know I've seen it from the start by my side. You know I've seen it from the...
Okay, so now I can leave this about there, about 30%, and then whenever the chorus comes in, I can turn this plugin off, and it's wide now.
Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are.
Yeah, Hunter, the DMG stuff is amazing. Such a great company. They make some seriously killer plugins. Really great support too. I've had, you know, if I've ever had an issue with any of their things, they respond within hours. It's pretty amazing.
Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround.
It's kind of cool with just the snaps, you know what I mean? Okay, let's go back and hear it in context and see how our delays are working in the mix.
I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tides back to you, yeah, got me feeling alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you.
This boom that happens at the top of the chorus, that can be a lot bigger, and I could maybe throw some reverb on it. That chorus just isn't quite hitting me how I want it to hit.
You know I've seen it from the start, it was. You know I've seen it from the start. You know I've seen it from the start, it was.
I also want to add a little bit of a digital crash on the top of that chorus. I already have some digital crashes throughout, but I say digital crash, but I actually mean kind of like analog crash, which is just kind of funny.
You know I've seen it from the start. You know I've seen it.
Yeah, that one's a little bit too pokey. Let me see what I have otherwise. There we go.
You know I've seen it from the start, it was all and alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away somewhere high.
feel like this needs a little bit of delay. I didn't before, but now I do. I mean, it's got a little, but...
To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Oh, now you... And I close my eyes. Oh, now your currents in my veins and I'm paralyzed. Your currents in my veins and I'm paralyzed. In my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
Sounds like there's a bass note that's a little bit off there. What is that?
To the way that you are, let me
Whoa. That sounds way better.
Somewhere high away, addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
I also want to pump up this little bass part here for a second, because it's like this little pulse thing. I'm pushing a little hard there. Again, like changing your kick drum balance and your bass, like making your mix more kick heavy and bass heavy. It's like that'll definitely affect your master bus. You kind of have to, even though I tried to set the master bus early and mix through it, man, you got to check it out when you're doing stuff like this. I've had to adjust it a few times. It's a little bit odd, but I'm actually going to try to use a little bit of gating or expansion on the bass, mostly at this section. Just to tighten it up a little bit, I'm not going to put it on the rest of the song. Most of the song is whole notes, so I'm just going to automate this on here. I do think that helps. I do. I think it helps just clear that little bit of clutter in the low end, to keep that ending tight. Again, so many of these decisions, like Dave Pensato says this, a lot of people have said this, I agree 100%, is that, you know, mixing is not one skill. It's a combination of hundreds and hundreds of small skills that each kind of add up to, you know, if you had to define mixing as a single skill, it would be more about knowing what to do and knowing, you know, but so much of it is just problem solving and figuring out ways to make things happen, and everyone's going to accomplish things a little bit differently. You know, even like automating the width on that, you know, Alex, you said that's clever. Yeah, well, that's just one way to do it. I bet there's a half a dozen other ways to make that happen. You know, maybe someone would do like 2 different delays, you know, one for the ending, one for, you know what I mean? That's a way to go as well. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. I like the gate thing, though. I think that helps the bass stay a little bit cleaner at the end. This is another weird little odd thing, but I feel like this S is getting cut off. Yeah. Anybody else notice that? Maybe, I don't know if that was a sloppy edit or he just sang it weird. Let me see if I can just copy in this one and kind of blend it. S's are really easy to edit because they're non-tonal. Boom.
Surround you. Surround you.
Sunray, that's good thing. That's a good thing. I'm glad that you feel something when you listen to this song. That's the goal of every songwriter and of me as the producer on this stuff and the mixer. I want people to enjoy it and feel something when they listen to it. Want it to feel powerful and cool and fun. All right, we gotta bring in our repeat backing vocals here. going to do much to these, but I might just give them overall a little more reverb.
You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you.
A little more obvious reverb, like the vocal plate.
You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you just the way you are.
So these vocals here at this moment, the doubles, I want to give them like a bunch of reverb for just this moment because the lead is not in. So I'm going to actually put reverb on the channel and put it pretty wet, but then automate it off. So it's just coming in for this little bit. Because I think what the band mentioned something about this, like the surround U's at 242 make them like noticeably verby or like they seem kind of dry or whatever. And a lot of that depends on what's the element that catches your ear. And I think because this is a double of the main, you know, it's catching your ear, you know, like, and because that particular double's not crazy loud, then, or because the particular double is, you know, it's the main melody of the song, and because it's decently loud, your ear hears it, and then it's almost like it says all those backing vocals are dry, but the other backing vocals are not that dry, right? Like, quite a bit of reverb on that. One way to make your vocals seem wetter without actually adding a lot more reverb is to add less or remove pre-delay.
Surround you, surround you just the way you are. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you just the way you are.
Another way you can do that is to help to match the top end of the reverb and the vocal a little bit better. So I made my reverb a little brighter, but then made the overall vocals a little darker.
Surround
So I'm going to make these doubles a little bit less wet than that. That's pretty wet. But then when the band comes in, I'm going to pull that reverb back down. So for now, I'm actually going to have the reverb off. I'm going to automate it on and then pull it down when the rest of the band comes in. That seemed to work pretty well. Let's make sure my automation did indeed write correctly. Sometimes when writing two channels at once, like I was writing there, like plugins on both these channels, one of them won't write correctly, so I just check. That's partly dependent on the plugin, I find, is sometimes the plugin doesn't like to write correctly. Not necessarily a Nuendo problem or a Logic problem or whatever, but I've seen it happen. Cool. Okay, so normally those doubles are like this.
I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you. You said that we could fly away somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
I'm gonna work on the mono double a little bit. This thing actually goes throughout the song. It seems just a little odd to me.
Oh, I've seen it from the start, it was all around you.
To soothe, to kind of tame some weird harmonics.
Oh, I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Oh, I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. Oh, I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. Oh, I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. And asking why I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tide back to you, you got me feeling alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you.
So what I'm doing now is pulling down the mono double in the chorus a little and letting the stereo doubles kind of take it. Clean up the center image of the chorus a little.
You said that we could fly away somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Oh, now your current's in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you just the way you are. Surround you.
Cool. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Let's see. Another big thing I want to focus on Mix B for any client is now I will say, and I would like to say, that not every Mix B is going to be this involved. You know, like I said, we kind of went for a little bit of a vibe change. Had we kind of figured that out earlier on and said, you know what, maybe this is more the vibe, I could have made some of these decisions during the original mix, right? A lot of times Mix B is like an hour-long process, if that, you know, and sometimes my Mix C is like 20 minutes, you know. Mix C, they'll be like, okay, turn up the kick a little bit and turn down the vocal a half dB and it's done, you know. A lot of times Mix C is very quick, but Mix B is kind of a toss-up. Sometimes, like, assuming you nailed Mix A, sometimes Mix B has like a bunch of small things, sometimes it has, you know, one or two big things. It just kind of depends. In this case, in this particular song, we went for a little bit of a vibe change, which required a lot more work, right? So it just kind of depends, right? It just kind of depends. I wanted to clarify that not every Mix B requires us to do a big sort of scene change like we've done. You know, turning up the kick and bass and kind of having to readjust everything at that point, you know, from master bus to vocals to pulling down some clutter on synths and guitars and letting the song be more like big vocal, big beat, big bass. You know what I mean? That's more of the sort of pop sensibility. And then let the other stuff be a little more sort of subdued and take up a little less room. So another thing I like to do in Mix B is check my transitions and make sure that going into part A or part B or whatever, I don't feel like they're lacking. And if I do feel like they're lacking, what can be done to make that better? So we're going to take a listen from the song up top. I'm going to get out a piece of paper and write down some notes. And we'll see. We'll just see kind of what state we're in.
I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turn the tides back to you, you got me feeling alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you. I close my eyes. Oh, now your currents in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took
Okay, so a couple of things I noticed. One, I think the vocal overall is maybe just a tiny bit too loud. Just a little bit. dB or something. We're going to address that a little bit more as time goes on, probably in the next live stream, but I'm going to do some better automation on this. I'd like to do sort of big block automation first, but then as it goes on, eventually towards the end of the mix, I do the final vocal ride, which essentially looks like this, where I am, automating every single word up and down like that. But we're not going to get to that yet, because the reason I like to wait for that is because I want to make sure the band overall is happy with the vocal level. And because we've done such a drastic scene change on this, I want to make sure that they're happy. Because some bands want the vocal a little more buried, some want it really up front. So it just kind of depends, right? So that was the first note. The lead was a little too loud. I went ahead and pulled that down while we were listening to it. So a couple of notes. The synth pad I feel like needs to be a little bit louder on the first note of the song, which I guess maybe I'm not crazy. You can see it here. It's like maybe a little quieter on that very first note for whatever reason. So I'm just going to automate that up.
I'm overthinking and asking why. I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to.
I also felt like that actually helps in a weird way. It doesn't seem like it would be much, but it seems balanced now.
I'm overthinking and asking why.
Right? I also felt like, and I noticed it just now, but I felt like the second verse felt a little empty, and this pad that we were using in verse 1,
to visualize,
you can see it turns down in the chorus, but does not turn back up, and it probably should.
To keep the moment I close my eyes.
Sometimes this is just easier to do by hand. I need to pull it back down at the chorus, which is here. And I need to pull it up through this section like that, but then give it a little bit of a bump on that first note. But I want it to kind of swell up and then drop back down.
To keep the moment. To keep the moment I close my eyes. Oh, now your currents in my veins and I'm paralyzed.
I also wanted that snare to hit just a little bit harder on that transition. So I'm going to just automate up the snare, maybe the snare sample for that.
My hesitate.
I also feel like that crash right there could be a little more drastic. Oh wait, here's my percussion back here. There is a crash there, but it's not super strong. I might add the digital crash there again.
My hesitations slowly fade.
That's satisfying. That's nice. You know, this is before and after. So here's without. Sorry about that. Here's before.
My hesitation.
And now.
My hesitations slowly fade.
Just seems a little more intentional. You know what I mean? Okay, let me check out my intro again.
I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tide, feeling alright.
Right here, I also wanted to pull the delay up a little. So there's a couple ways I can do that. So one thing, I'm going to make the delay on all right wider.
Got me feeling
Gradually.
alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was alright.
That's cool. That's a cool effect. I'm also going to make it a little bit brighter on just that word.
You got me feeling alright. You know
I know that will automatically.
You know I've seen it from, you know I've seen it, you know I've seen it. You know I've seen it from the start, you know I've seen it.
Might give this a little bump on that first hit. This is a trick I learned from Eric Valentine. What he calls a push. You can just bump it. Or maybe he calls it a bump. I don't remember. It's very subtle, but it's like adding a little bit of a transient on something that's more steady state, or something that just seems a little flat at the start of a section.
You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you.
Another thing I can do is pull down the bass slightly before that chorus to give it more impact, just a little.
Back to
It's not very loud already.
alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away, addicted to the way that you are.
So I'm going to go ahead and put on some more I'm going to put a little bit of saturation on my claps and turn them up.
Back to
It's a fine line because, again, you can kill the punch of something. Those are pretty saturated already. I don't need to do anything of those.
away, addicted to the way that you are. Somewhere high away, addicted to the way that you are. Let me surround you. Somewhere high away, addicted to the way that you are. Let me surround you.
A great way to add a little bit of impact is to automate your master bus. I have no shame in doing this. I love automating the master bus. and I'm going to just pull up everything before the first chorus is going to go down a half dB.
Somewhere high away, addicted to the way that you are. Let me.
Sorry, everything before the turnaround.
To keep the moment, I close my eyes. Currents in my veins. My hesitations slowly fade away with you. When you are by my side, you know I've seen.
I'm going to do the same thing on the vocal delay here. I'm going to automate it slightly louder, slightly brighter, and slightly wider.
Slowly fade away with you. When you are by my side, you know I've seen it from the start. It was all around. Slowly fade away with you. When you are by my side, you know I've seen it from the start. It was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better view. You said that we could fly away, somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
I'm also going to do another automation move here. So at this part of the song,
Around you.
I'm going to pull everything at this point down a quarter dB. So now what happens is our song starts half a dB lower, just a little bit, right?
Those days were
On our master bus. So this is post compression, post everything. It's not like the Pro Tools where the master bus is kind of a little funny like that, but this is indeed post everything. So our whole master is half dB down. The first turnaround goes up to 0.25, and this last section of the song goes up to 0. It's a subtle change, okay? It's just enough though to make everything kind of bump up a little. Drums, bass, guitars, vocals, everything. And again, once you get to mastering, this is gonna sort of level out a little bit, but it will be affected. You know what I mean? It will come through as just a subtle shift where you feel the change more than you really hear it. I really want to make that pump thing really prominent as well, so I'm going to automate the bass. Right now the bass doesn't really do that. The live bass does, but not the synth bass, so I'm going to actually draw this in. So, check this out. We're going to do, we're going to do like that. Maybe something like this. Boom. It's a cool little effect. I might go ahead and make these more like that. A little more drastic. And then I think I'm going to turn the synth bass up slightly, this part. No, I already have it up slightly, but I guess I'll turn it up a little bit more. I do want to give my synth bass a little bit more thickness and width in the low mids. That area, and I'm gonna do mid side EQ. So I'm gonna. This is my tonal shaping, but then I'm gonna give another bump in the side channel. Now, if you're listening in mono, you won't hear this, but. I'm torn on what to do about that. I feel like because that's going on with the vocal, I should space it a little. Like just automate on a little Haas effect kind of thing. I think I like that. I can always take it off if it's, you know, not helpful. I am going to automate this delay at the back here, this back section, a little bit brighter and thinner. I don't like that Haas effect thing on those bells. It's messing with me. Okay. I think I'm happy with it. I think this is a solid mix B. I'm ready to send to the client and get mix notes for mix C. Does anybody out there watching have any questions before we call it? I'm going to obviously play the song again, but want to just see if anybody else has any questions before we call it a day about anything I did on this mix or anything really in general. Let me know in the comments. I'm going to go grab a drink of water. All right. One more thing I wanted to do. I actually missed a note of mine. Something needs to happen. What did I say? Something needs to happen. Turnaround 1 on the synths.
From the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you. You said that we could fly away somewhere high.
Okay, so obviously the main hook comes in, but I think what I meant was something needs to happen like thickness-wise because the vocal goes away. Maybe I'll just turn this pad up a little bit there, like a couple dB. It's not a bad change, you know, just a subtle amount. I might also turn the synth bass down slightly before that turnaround. So like here, from this point before, just drop that down slightly. Half a dB, something like that. Yeah, just Keith asks, how do you decide when to sidechain? So that's a great question. To me, whether I'm sidechaining kick into bass or kick into something else, into synths or whatever it may be, or snare into acoustic guitar buses, that's one I like to do. Usually it's when I need thing A and thing B to both be loud and coexist, but I'm struggling to get them to do so. So same with like bass and kick, right? It's like I want both of them to be loud, but I want I want to hear both of them clearly. And a lot of times the transient thing if the transient thing is not a particularly, say, clicky thing, like if the kick is not clicky, it might be a little harder to hear with the bass. And so if you sidechain into the bass, then you can get by with a slightly darker kick drum that is fat and dark, but that ducks the bass momentarily when it goes in, you know, like a typical sidechain thing does, like this. Right, this is on my bass. And you can see my bass channel here, dipping slightly. Just a little bit, you know, this says 6 dB, but it's very quick. It's very quick. Sometimes it works better to do less, but a slower release. Or very quick. It's hard to listen to, but if you really focus in on it, you can hear the effect that it has of keeping that clear. I also like sidechaining vocals into certain things that are competing for vocal space. Like I said, I like sidechaining snare into acoustic guitar buses, or guitar buses sometimes in general. Acoustic guitars, though, are often very percussive and have a lot of those high harmonics, but they can eat up a lot of clarity on your snare because they can get really clicky. So if the snare drum goes into your acoustic guitar group, your ear will be hearing the transient of the snare more than the transients of those acoustics. But when the snare is not playing, you'll hear the transients of the acoustics. So again, it's usually when I'm trying to get things to coexist that both need to be loud and proud. So hopefully that answers your question. Good question. Cool. Well, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I'm going to listen one more time and just see if there's anything else I want to tweak. And otherwise, we'll call it a day.
I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tides back to you, yeah, got me feeling alright. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all around you. You took me by the hand, got me up into a better you. You said that we could fly away somewhere addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
I don't know what it is, that one hit on that guitar just kind of bothers me. It just seems a little too loud. I close my eyes. Oh, now your currents in my veins and I'm paralyzed. My hesitations slowly fade away with you when you are by my side. You know I've seen it from the start, it was all
then we could fly away somewhere high away. Addicted to the way that you are, let me surround you.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with everything. Probably do one or two little tiny tweaks. Like I said, I got to check it against my reference, which I can't do here on YouTube because of copyright. But I'll check it against the reference and just adjust anything if needed. But thanks everyone for hanging out. Hope this has been informative and maybe you've learned some things. There will be a follow-up stream, probably another 2, where we are doing the final mix tweaks as given from the client and, you know, from listening to it some more. And also I'm working on trying to get a live stream thing going with my mastering engineer rather than me mastering it. Because like I mentioned on the first stream, I don't do much mastering anymore. I usually send it off to a dedicated mastering person because I have realized and learned over the years the value of having an unbiased third person who has never heard it master it. That to me is the biggest thing what you're paying for with a mastering engineer. And I've been talking to him, and hopefully he doesn't have a streaming setup like I do, but maybe I can work it out where I can bring my setup to him or some parts of it and make a little mobile setup and have him live stream his mastering session, which would be awesome. Mastering is usually very behind closed doors, and I would love to be able to show people mastering engineer at work doing that, getting things loud and working on this song from the final mix. So everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to check out the stream and ask great questions. Check out the Recording Lounge podcast at recordingloungepodcast.com, and of course on your favorite podcast player app or website. And got some more episodes planned in the future. But thank you, everyone. Again, great questions. And thanks for the support. Take it easy.
I'm overthinking and asking why. I used to build a world inside my head to visualize. Those days were empty, but when I turned the tides back to you, yeah, got me feeling